Hello everybody, it's DuckFaden07. It's time for new brew. Okay, so this time we are playing also mid-range scam. So this is the archetype that existed in modern like a year ago, and for a few months it was pretty popular, and it got replaced later with other versions of scam. Uh, Lately, mostly it was black-red scam decks, which are now tier 1 in modern. But uh, this archetype, the white-black version, was also always interesting to me, and I played for a lot of time. I played the Abzan version of this deck with Aldrami Schools, a few Grists, and some other one-offs. And but with printing of GIX, YAWGMOTH PRAETOR, I really wanted to try to. Sorry, I got these pop-ups going on all the time. Still didn't find a way to solve them. Okay, so I really liked GIX when I saw it, and this shell seemed one of the ideal few shells that could use GIX potential. It's basically better mana Toski for 1 mana less. Okay, so it's good with the small creatures, cheap creatures entering early, and it's good with the Doughty Void Walker, which has Shadow. Both Esper Sentinel, Stoneforge Mystic can deal damage early when you're on the play and playing gigs on the curve. Okay, so there's just many of these times you're just scamming turn 1 or turn 2, let's say, and then again Gix comes turn 3 and draws you some cards of your grief and Doty, whatever, Stoneforge, just helps to close out those games that Orzo Scam usually had problems closing. Sorry for this. As I said, I have these pop-ups appearing very often, and I can't solve them. It happened since I had my downloaded movie torrent from the Pirate Bay, whatever. Okay, so other than that, we are playing some basic stuff you would expect to see in Scam in the black white Scam deck. So we're playing 9 scam, let's say scam cards. We have 4 ephemerates, 3 molecules rebirths, and 2 undying gills. We can use all of them to scam our grief on turn 1, even solitude turn 1 or later, whatever. It's not like this is the Fury version where you can scam Fury turn 1 and hope to win with it in few turns. If you just scam Solitude, it's kind of too slow. It's kind of too slow and won't do the job the Fury does. So other than that, we are trying to be a bit more grindier. So Stoneforge Mystic with Butterskull Caldra and the swords. We have a lot of creatures in, so we're trying to uh, um, use those equipments as good as possible. Caldra is not what it used to be, or but even Butterskull, but there are still good threats. And a lot of decks just don't have solutions for Caldra. Okay, so I played a few leagues in this deck. I had 2-4-1 leagues and several 3-2 leagues. The deck is holding up pretty good. Um, uh, and getting some very good results. And I still didn't have a negative league with this deck, so all leagues went really good for me, and I think that's a sign the deck really has some potential. Okay, after you play like 4 or 5 leagues, all of these leagues are very good. A few of them are very close to the trophy, and and some losses were really unfortunate. And this deck just has a solid game against any opponent. And we will just go through the latest league. I finished 4-1, and we'll see the games. They were pretty good. So mana base is pretty simple. 4 courtyards, 4 godless shrines, four marsh flats, 4 basics, 1 urborg, 2 silent clearings, and 3 Malakir's rebirth. Okay, so on the sideboard we have some Sanctifier, which is a good hate for Scam, other versions of Scam. We have Temporary Lockdown, which is good hate for Hammer Time, and like some Saga decks, and often Affinity, Scales, stuff like that. So we're playing 4 Doughty main and just 1 Graveyard Hate piece on the sideboard, just 1 Unlicensed Curse, and we're having 1 Kataki here. Kataki is specifically and mostly for the Affinity matchup, while we have some other cards that are good against artifact decks. So we're playing 3 Fracture. This card is proven to be very good. It deals with Leyland Binding, it deals with Planeswalkers, it deals with Urza Saga, and it's just usable in lots of different situations. Okay, so Kaya has a few abilities. It can gain your life, exile some cards from graveyard, but this exile permanent with mana value 1 or less is the most exciting. You can use it to exile construct tokens, hammer, uh, cigar disease, dead shadows, whatever, ragavans, DRCs. So there's just a bunch of mana value 1 permanents in the current modern. We are playing a third Fatal Push on the sideboard. I decided to go with Fatal Pushes over the Prismatic Ending. So for Prismatic Ending, it would be probably more ideal if I just play a few more fetches and have access to 1 Abzan Triumph, which then unnecessarily complicates the mana base, and Fatal Push is just a very good option right now, and I need to have like kind of larger amount of black cards for consistently scamming Grief on turn 1, because often that's a path to victory. Okay, so we are also playing additional removals, 2 Dance on the sideboard. This is a mass removal, so it's additional hate against those aggro decks, hammer time decks, whatever. So but it also specifical hate for that kills Murktide for just 2 mana, and it's overall just a very good card. Okay, so we go through the league, watch some games. That's it. Okay, my only loss this league was to 4-color elementals. Okay, game 1 in match 1, playing first, scamming Grief immediately on turn 1, discarding Channeler and Mishra's Bubble. I left Counterspell in my opponent's head because I played Stoneforge and the Counterspell wasn't doing much. Okay, so I was able to just I was able to hold the rebirth and also put Sword of Fire Ice to play this turn. So I was in a pretty good position. My opponent had only Counterspell in hand. So I decided to immediately I put the sword end of turn, and I decided to go for the attack. And for some reason, my opponent doesn't use the Otawara. Opponent probably thought they need 4 mana for Otawara, but they had Ragavan on the field. I was prepared for them bouncing the sword and then playing Rebirth on Stoneforge, them using the counterspell, and then going GIX next turn. That was the plan, but my opponent just didn't even use the Otawara, and the game was pretty much over. Okay, so game 2, I kept decent hand, Doughty, Stoneforge, Totsis, but unfortunately no removal for turn 1 Ragavan, and the opponent had a pretty good hand. They also top decked a second land in a situation where they didn't have any. Okay, so unfortunately they had the dress down, so I wasn't able to play this Solitude efficiently. I wasn't able to scam it in. I killed Ragavan because of the dress down. They were holding 2 mana all the time, so I just went for the shock, and then I kill the Ragavans because it was very hard taking these hits, constantly worrying about they'll just swarm me with my own cards. Okay, so I had a few options. They still were holding Just Down and also Murktide in hand. We both decided to play a bit slower, and my opponent luckily Ledger was just one. They were holding the Just Down, so they were unable to pump it. They had removal for the Stoneforge. I let it happen. They play the iteration, consider, put counter on Shredder, attack. So this was my chance to just try to do something. Finally, put this Solitude on the field, but it wasn't ideal. It wasn't ideal, so my opponent still had the Dress Down and Murktide for next turn. I should have exiled the creature this turn to gain 2 life. And my opponent saved the Dress Down for next turn. So I wasn't able to kill the Murktide, and that was it. I could have maybe lived on 1 life this turn. And try to do something, try to draw something next turn, but it was a pretty bad situation for me. Okay, so game 3, playing on the draw, mulligan to decent 6 cards. So 2 Void Walkers, Stoneforges, decent number of good threats against Murktide. Okay, so what happened? Okay, so my opponent had the Ragavan turn 1 again, unfortunately. So I wasn't able to play Darty on turn 1. I had to go for the Dam. Immediately get rid of these Ragavan. And then I started playing my threats, of course. My opponent had infinite removals. I then played second Darty. And I had Doughty Stoneforge for next turn. My opponent had the Brotherhood's End, and that's the reason why I decided to play 2 of my threats this turn. So because I hoped they played their only Brotherhood End, but unfortunately they had more in hand. But again, it was cool situation. I top deck the Ephemerate with Stoneforge, so if they try to kill it, I can save it and find another equipment. So these Murktide decks no longer play the Archmage large number of Archmage Charmers, so they mostly can't steal my Cauldron. I decided to go for I decided to go for the ephemerate in response to the dress down. I found myself a Sword of Fire and Ice, and my opponent was able to play two Murktide Regents, and I just had the Caldera on the field, so it was a hard situation for me. And my opponent also played ultra slow. They were like really brutally slow, and I dealt 5 damage this turn, and I had 9 damage next turn for lethal. They didn't have a solution for it, so I just equipped the sword. I also had the solitude to live one more turn and win on time, probably. Also, I would win anyway with the 2 attacks if this wasn't lethal. Okay, so that was it. That was a game against the Murktide. We'll first watch all the wins as always. The loss was against a 4-color elementals deck that they just had it all, so it was pretty hard. In that matchup, and game 2 I just didn't have anything. Okay, so my opponent, I discarded 2 Cigardas 8s, make my opponent go for the Sentinel, and then look at their hand again, discard the Stoneforge, leaving them with just a Canopy and 1 Hammer. So pretty good start for me. I controlled this game from start, and I was in a pretty good situation. Okay, so I was able to start attacking here. So I just went for Sentinel and then Ephemerate on the draw step. Okay, so this was their hand now, and this was after. So I decided to get rid of the hammer because skill is useless until their next turn. So again, I went for Ephemerate, discard skill, draw the useless Totsis at this situation. My opponent deal 1 damage with Sentinel. I just kind of wanted to draw the 4th land before playing this Sword of Fire and Ice. Like, really didn't want to give them cards. I draw into GIX, which is just a very good greatest draw in these situations. Um, Unfortunately, my opponent top decked the second blacksmith skill, and they top decked the Urza Saga, so they had, considering they had 0 cards in hand, nothing going on, they had a pretty brutal top decks. And I had the worst top decks in this situation, so I top decked 2 Totsis in situation where they're on 0 cards in hand and I'm on low life. So I just went for Dotia for attack. Um, and my opponent got another Saga on the field, which was just too much. And I jumped 1 and killed it. I used the Undying Evil to make my GIX survive, to be able to draw another card next turn. So this I drew into Solitude and had the Miraculous Rebirth. I just needed 1 more white card to kind of get out of this and then try to stay in the game. But my opponent just had two good top decks, and sometimes you just can't beat it when they top deck that good. They had like exactly blacksmith skill they needed. Then they top decked the Saga into another Saga. Okay, so I have a pretty good sideboard plan against the Hammer Time matchup. So these fractures are definitely very good They kill everything in their deck, from Saga to Hammer, Cigar Disease, everything relevant really. So I went for GIX, but unfortunately they had the Sanctifier, so I still wasn't able to attack here. And they got off to a good start with two Sanctifiers, a Giver of Runes. Their clock was slow though, and I had a fracture in case they draw the hammer. Also had the solitude to deal with the card. So it was a kind of decent situation. Not the greatest, but playable. So definitely in this situation, first need to get rid of the giver of runes, which I immediately did this turn, ditching one fracture, just getting rid of the giver of runes, and now waiting for some top deck. Immediately got rid of the cigar disease. Then I went for attack with everything to draw me a card. I drew one card with X, so it was land for next turn for Solitude. I was able to play the Den, kill everything except for Caldra, which I had Solitude for next turn, so I was in okay situation. My opponent had a lot of luck next turn, and I had some luck this game. Okay, so went for Solitude. They didn't have Blacksmith skill, which was basically only thing that could have saved them. So unfortunately, they had the Paladin, so I again needed the top deck, and my opponent went for attack, thinking Blacksmith skill will pump the pure steel Paladin, but nothing happened. I survived on one life. They used second Blacksmith skill on the Paladin. I then top decked. I had Fracture and Undying Evil in the hand. Urza Saga on the field. I removed the Sprinkly Drum. I didn't want them um, to be able to have 3 artifacts and Metalcraft for Paladin. I didn't worry about Sigarda Raid at the moment because I had both Fracture and Undying Evil. So I just went for block to gain some life, then exile the Paladin, hold Fracture in the hand, and just use Kaya to eat all of these 1 mana permanents. First Hammer, of course, and then start attacking with Solitude, and also top decking into Ephemerate just to be completely safe from any harm. Gaining additional life with Kaya, and the next turn going to get rid of the Cicadas 8, so this Kaya just completely takes the game away from the hammer time, and that's one of the reasons why I play it. Okay, so they went for the Inkmoth Nexus, and since I had the Ephemerate in hand, I decided to go for the Fracture, kill it, making them unable to block my creatures, to make my clock faster. Also, all these undying spells just work really great at this point of the game. And after another ephemerate, my opponent conceded that was it. So uh, it was time for game 3. So I think my opponent had a lot of luck game 1. I had also had luck game 2, and now it was time for game 3, where my sideboard cards just won me the game. Okay, so starting hand was decent, nothing spectacular, but I had a fracture to deal with early hammer. Kataki wasn't largely useful. I don't play it because of this matchup, but it's kind of okay here, so I put it in. And they went for second Sanctifier, and I top decked Temporary Lockdown, which is just complete blowout for the Hammer Time matchups. I played Grief next turn, discarding the Paladin, and my opponent was now on 0 cards in hand. So I couldn't play my cards safely like a Butterskull because they have the Inkmoth Nexus and Sigarda's Aid, and one top deck from Hammer just immediately kills me. That's why I got rid of the Sigarda's Aid. I top decked Thoughtseizes to discard the Caldra. It was nice, but I think I would still be in a very good position without it. So my opponent trades with Stoneforge, Inkmoth Nexus, just completely removing their odds for doing anything. I went for another Stoneforge, finding my Caldra, then attacking for another 4 with Batterskull. So my opponent just had the Urza Saga, and I had Caldra, so I was able to put my opponent on 1 life this turn, which means with 0 cards in hand, they need some godlike top decks to survive until the next turn, and that was it. My opponent conceded. So, okay, that was game 3, I think. Okay. Okay, so this match was a very interesting matchup. My opponent played Turbo Proves. It's a version that plays the Lumimancer, Suspirs, Blister Cold Weird, so all the most aggressive creatures. I was just hoping they play the mutagenic growth, so I get closer to top decking the Solitude because it's the only thing that keeps me alive. But my opponent had a kill immediately next turn, so there just wasn't anything I could have done in this situation. Going with Lava Dart and double Lava Dart and Bolt to Face, also mutagenic growth. They kind of had the perfect hand, so game 1 goes in their direction. So a very fast, aggressive decks. So it just kills turn 3. So pretty much aggressive. I need to have. I need to have. I need to have or draw some strong. Unfortunately, my draws weren't really good, so um, the odds of winning this were getting lower, and they got rid of my Stoneforge. Also, didn't even had the black card for Grief before my opponent emptying their hand. Okay, so I got another card. My opponent just played a bunch of creatures this turn. I equipped the sword, drew into Solitude, but unfortunately didn't have the second white card, and my opponent was able to destroy the sword. So luckily they had just 6 this turn, and I couldn't play My opponent had just a red mesa in hand at this point. I wasn't able to just do much now. They just went to play the Iron Mesa the hand, went to Gigante the hand. I played another land and played my Butterskull, which means it's their top deck time. They have to top deck the Lava Dart or Bolt to win this game, or I gain 7 life next turn, and it's I'm too far away. So my opponent figured that I can equip Butterskull on Solitude, and the Giganta doesn't mean anything in this situation. Okay, so they conceded. Okay, so it was time for game 3. Game 3 is pretty not easy, but also mulliganing to 6. But I had the Solitude Ephemerate, so I decided to keep the one lander. Also went for Sentinel turn 1, which is decent against them on the play, but on the draw not so great. Didn't draw another land. I was waiting until my opponent taps out, but they didn't want to tap out. And fortunately, I don't know why, but I went for Ephemerate and they didn't respond now. But after they probably F6 or something, so I also got the card from the Esper Sentinel and got the land from the Pet to Exile. So I was now on 3 lands, pretty good. Butterskull, Kaldra in the hand. Still a lot of life, so my situation getting better and better. My opponent again used the dart to get rid of the Stoneforge, attack 4/4, but I was now close. I was now close to winning this. I discarded the last card in their hand, and I just hoped they don't find the bolt. Unfortunately, they did find the bolt. They had a little bit of luck there, so I was in a harder situation. Now I needed the land for Butterskull. Didn't get it last turn, but I got it this turn. So now it was a pretty hard game for my opponent. Butterskull on the field, Solitude in the hand, gaining 6 life, and doing the sword ability, killing their creatures. They top deck the Pet to Exile, but at this point I already had the Solitude in, and all these cards. So it was pretty much game over. So I just played my Solitude, equipped the sword, and that's GG. So that was it. A pretty tricky matchup. Okay, so last game was a matchup I didn't play against for a longer time. I kept mediocre hand, just the Totsis and Solitude Rebirth. They had they had Inquisition and Elvish Reclaimer. I didn't have a removal for Reclaimer, which meant they to find Urza Saga on turn 2. That's why I discarded the Reclaimer. Okay, so they got rid of the Rebirth, but I wasn't in a much hurry to cast this Solitude anyway, so it wasn't the most important card now. Okay, sorry about these pop-ups. As I said, I just can't get rid of them. It's very annoying. But my antivirus just doesn't find it. I'm very sorry. Okay, so you top decked the GIX. GIX immediately draw me a card, 5th land to cast my Solitude. And it was a deal, just casting this Solitude next turn and going in with GIX, drawing another card, dealing 3 damage, having 2 Stoneforges in hand. My opponent I top deck the push to kill the token, put my opponent on 1, draw 2 cards with GIX, so you can see that GIX just completely took over this game. It drew me 5 cards, so it was definitely GIX win. Okay, so game 2, and this match I mulliganed to 6 cards. These temporary lockdowns are not as great when you're playing against Totsy's deck as they are when the opponent just doesn't know you have it. And I was in a pretty awkward situation. My opponent had Urza Saga resolving, which means they will get the Haywire Might. And they know I have the temporary lockdown, so that will definitely be their target. So ideally, in this situation, I would just play the temporary lockdown and completely demolish my opponent. But now I didn't top deck the third land, so I wasn't able to do anything this turn. I had to wait for next turn until the lockdown. I maybe could have played the dam. Okay, so I played the lockdown, but my opponent had the Bosiju, and they had a lethal. I was able to kill one of their tokens, but they have lethal with hers anyway, so that was it. Okay, so it was time to play game 3. Okay, so pretty decent hand. Game 3. Turn 1 Totsis into turn 2 Mystic. Of course, they had the 2 removal spells, so turn 2 Mystic didn't happen. I was saving Rebirth in hand in case I need to scam the Solitude later. Just went for the GIX. And the GIX just completely took over this game too, as in the previous one. You can see my opponent. I decided not to waste the fatal push. It's like almost the same. Them jumping and drawing the card, it's pretty much very similar. So I decided not to use the push. Definitely like push. So I had Doughty here, and I decided to kill the second token. So I have ability to draw 2 cards with GIX. Next turn, my opponent has just 1 colorless mana. Tireless Tracker in hand with another 2 lands, so I had the Fracture for their Urza Saga and had a good beatdown plan. Okay, so my opponent had a Tireless Tracker. I just wanted to attack through next turn with both of my creatures, so I decided to just solitude it and not use the Marker's Rebirth because they have the Spell Bomb anyway, so they used the Spell Bomb anyway, and I kept the Rebirth in hand. And now I was able to draw 2 more cards with GIX. You can see that this GIX was just incredible. Incredible this game. Not just this game, but a lot of games I played in this league. It won me both of the matches against the Green Black Rock, game 1 and game 3. And this situation, I just exile the Witherbloom command from my opponent's hand, play the Grief, had a lethal next turn, and that was it. So we will now just watch the loss against the 4-color elementals. You know, sometimes 4-color elementals just have everything, or you kind of have to have everything to win this. And I went for a Grief turn 1 just with 1 land, but unfortunately they had a Solitude. If they didn't have the Solitude here, I would be in a lot better situation. So I didn't have the early pressure um, from the from the sorry grief. And in that situations, you're always hoping to draw another land with the Doughty and start doing some pressure there. I couldn't get another um, Undying Spell or Ephemerate, just a bunch of Esper Sentinels and even no white mana. So I discarded the Bolt from my opponent's hand, and they had just the Sacred Foundry at this moment, so this game wasn't over. But the longer it goes, that means uh, it will probably end up in their favor. So they obviously were holding the Solitude and decided to kill. They didn't want to cast it last turn, but they decided to cast it this turn. I went for a Scam Solitude, kill both of their creatures, so I was again in a good situation. But as you can see, just my opponent had great draws from the top of their deck, and I was still on the 3 mana. So the longer game goes in this situation, uh, my chances are just lowering a lot. And they even had the ending for my Mystics. I was unable to get the Butterskull down, and they also got the Risen Reef. I was able to cast my Grief, discard the last card from their hand, and their top deck was the Ephemerate. So it was pretty brutal from my opponent, and I was still in the game. I needed the 5th land to be white to cast my Solitude, but it didn't happen, so I was able to cast my Butterskull, but they had the double Teferi on top of their deck, so that was it. The game lasted a bit longer because they're killing me really slowly, but mostly that was it, so I will just go to game 2. And the game 2, as I already said, I had a pretty weak hand. Just Ephemeral Solitude doesn't do much, and I was kind of I felt bad about this matchup. Also, I drew into a Kaja Butterskull, which is like the worst thing it can happen. And they again had a great start. They had the ending. They had ending, then iteration. So I was still in the game. Got the Totsis from top of my deck. My opponent used Solitude, and I was this situation I was able to discard Fury from their hand, so they were left with Fury and Boseiju. I got their played their iteration, drew into land and Stoneforge, find myself the 3rd equipment, so I had all the equipments down, but they again top decked the Teferi. I just needed them to not have the solution here. I didn't want them to kill my Stoneforge Mystic, but I kind of wanted them to use the Fury. And the Fairy, this situation just was definitely a problem with Ephemerate in hand. And I also got the Solitude to kill the Fury, but they just got crazy top decks like Omnat into Lightning Bolt to kill this um, Solitude that I was planning to use to kill the Omnat. So it was just kind of a crazy draws from my opponent. And at this point, they also find another solution for Stoneforge Mystic, and I conceded soon after that. So that was the loss against 4 color. They just kind of had it all. As I said, I played 4 or 5 of these leagues, all with pretty good results. All leagues were positive, either 3-2 or 4-1. Deck just feels pretty strong, and I feel like this is very viable scam variant to play in modern currently. I think GIX is a very good solution for these three job slots. And some of you know that I played the Abzan version in the past with Eljamis Calls, Grist, sometimes Glyphs, sometimes Stoneforge Mystics. But I think the Orzo now has enough good cards to just stay in Orzo. And we also have the Phyrexian Soul Gorger, or is it called something like that? And I think it competes with with GIX, YAWGMOTH PRAETOR, and GIX just has been incredible in all these leagues I played. It definitely shines in uh, in a lot of these non-interactive matchups, and there is really a whole lot of them right now. And but also it helps close the game after scamming the grief turn one. So basically, you're mostly when scamming grief turn one with ephemerate or undying spell. You're mostly getting rid of the removal spells. If you can get to 3 mana to cast gigs, um, you're almost always sure you will just play gigs on turn three, turn four, whatever, and immediately draw one card, two card, or more. So it's a mostly card with immediate impact, and unlike Soul Gorger, or what it's called, and which is just 3 mana 3/3, and gigs in the 99% of situations until now, it had immediate impact and almost always drew me at least one card upon entering. Few times it didn't have the immediate impact. I was also losing pretty hard, so I was just trying to bait the counterspell with it, or bait and try to block or jump some other creature, whatever. So, but when I played it with point, it was always good. Okay, so that's it. Hope you like the deck. Uh, I had always have great fun with this scam variants. Um, so if you like the deck, if you like the video, hit the subscribe, hit like to help the channel, and that's it. Once again, I'm a bit sick with large body temperature, high body temperature, and I'm sorry about the pop-ups. So once again, can't get rid of them still. I hope to do it soon. Okay, so that's it for today. Goodbye.